I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to TAPMI for having given me the privilege of being here today. On this occasion, I'd like to extend my best wishes to Dr. Pai, to all the members of the TAPMI community, and greet them on their outstanding achievements. I was very happy to hear that TAPMI is now in the 20th position among all India business schools. I expect that on the 90th birth anniversary of TAPMI, TAPMI will have the resolve of being the #1 business school in India in the next 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, on this occasion, we are deeply inspired by the remarkable works of Dr. Pai Panandiker and what he spoke about TAPMI. I had the pleasure of listening to a live sketch of TAPMI this morning when a book was released by the Karnataka legislature. And truly, TAPMI is a model to all management students and members of the management fraternity. I think he was among the first managers in the private sector to make a transition from corporate India to the public sector. And that transition was smooth, effortless, and seamless, which is why the Food Corporation of India, the LIC, and all other institutions which he dealt with are now on such secure foundations. I also heard with great interest Dr. Pai Panandiker's final words when he said, "What does TAPMI stand for all of us?" And I think the competence, the compassion, the integrity, and the selflessness that his life exemplified are truly something that all of us must remember and try to emulate in our lives. So, thank you, sir, for having invited me this evening and for having provided me with this great opportunity to learn and to imbibe so many of the lessons which TAPMI has exemplified. Let me speak a few words about this subject, because this subject looks very smart, but actually it is a very dull subject. I chose it because I thought that to a young management audience, I should speak about something topical, something contemporary, and also draw upon my experiences in the public domain over the last 3 decades, and try to bring to this management audience what it is to deal with the government in the coming years. When I played this subject to a dear friend of mine, he said, "You know, this is a very boring subject." And so I feel a little bit like Elizabeth Taylor's 10th husband. Remember, she was married 10 times, who is supposed to have been very worried on his wedding night. So a friend of his asked him, "Why are you so worried?" And he said, the 10th husband said, "You know, I know what is to be done, but I don't know how to make it interesting." There are 3 propositions I want to place before you. The first proposition is that management and the bureaucracy are not antithetical. That today, management and what we loosely term as the bureaucracy are coming together. And my endeavor will be to show you how. The second proposition is that today it is a misnomer to speak about the term bureaucracy. It may have suited the day and age of many years ago, but today we must talk of this as new public management, which characterizes the public domain. And the third proposition that I'd like to establish is that now, in the 21st century, the India that you are going to inhabit and become managers, there is definitely a convergence between the private sector or corporate India and the public domain, or what I call new public management. And this convergence brings out many exciting opportunities for you, both by way of professional development and by way of academic interest. Ladies and gentlemen, those of us in the bureaucracy, and my dear friend the IG is here, are used to a lot of bureaucratic bashing. You pick up the newspapers, you hear them speaking about indifferent bureaucrats, pejoratively called babus. Now it seems to me that this bashing has also extended to the private sector in the wake of 2G. You know, all these top-notch executives who were arrested and given a taste of Tihar jail belong to the blue-chip companies of India. On the 16th of January, I came across an excellent article written by a young IAS officer who was actually complaining that this kind of bureaucratic bashing and this news report that India's bureaucracy is among the worst in Asia is a bit far-fetched. He asked an interesting question, and I'd like to pose it before you. TCS is today an example in the world for its excellence. What if its CEO, N. Chandra, instead of reporting to the chairman, reported to Pappu Yadav? Or, closer to home, what if the Infosys executives like Nandan Nilekani or Chris Gopalakrishnan, instead of reporting to Narayan Murthy, reported instead to Suresh Kalmadi? Now, he was stretching the point, but what he was trying to say is that in these difficult times, it is also good to remember that selfless people who work in the system make it what it is today. And despite all its inadequacies, the system works. From Jammu and Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Bihar to Kerala, any district you go to can be recognized for its administrative system, which in a way has been bequeathed to us by the British. You go to a state capital, you see that the systems, the structure, the processes that keep the government going are more or less similar. Now, I'm not an apologist for the system, nor am I making the argument that, you know, all that works is well. What I'm trying to say is that this system is a rugged system. It has survived the passage of time, and now it is up to us to make it function better. I worked in the World Bank for some time, and my beat was Africa. I used to go regularly to Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and Ethiopia. These countries have all been ravaged by dictatorships. Their government system is completely emasculated. There is hardly any talent left in their public system. And their common query to me was, how do the All India services survive in India? How do you ensure that 6 to 8 lakhs of people, young men and women, compete and want to get in to the All India services to become members of the IAS, the IPS, the Foreign Service, and so on and so forth? But that is one point. The other is, even at the lower levels, at the cutting edge, we see a high profusion of talent and capability. The problems are that we are not able to make it work effectively. And that is a management dilemma. But before I come to the management dilemma, I'd also like to say that there are some pressing issues that we have to answer. And those issues are something that I'd like to pose before you. One issue is of reservation. The conflict between efficiency and equity. And this conflict is not going to be resolved that easily. The second issue is about access. Take healthcare, for instance, in India. Should it be provisioned in the private sector, or should the state expand health facilities? If the state expands health facilities, it will lead to better access, but certainly there's a trade-off in terms of efficiency as we know it in terms of maximization. These are major issues today that we face in our country that we have to resolve one way or the other. Why do they arise? They arise because there are some major critical differences between the public domain and the private domain, and I would like a young audience like this to bear it in mind and to appreciate it. And let me now speak from the management perspective of this. The first difference between the public domain and the private domain, or what we call management, is the difference of ownership. Government is loosely owned. It may be owned by the people, we the people, but that ownership brings about a different dimension when considered in the context of ownership of the private sector. And this ownership leads to many issues down the line, including the issue of reservations, the conflict between efficiency and equity, and so on. But that is not the only difference. A second major difference is in the way objectives are defined in our system. In the public system, objectives are not well defined. There are various conflicting objectives within the same system. For instance, if you look at water supply, water is a dire need in our country. If you adopt the canon of efficiency alone, you cannot provide water supply coverage to all areas, especially remote rural areas, because the user pays principle does not apply. So what do? Do you deny people water? Do you ensure that the state keeps away from providing water to those people who cannot pay for it? A third issue is the way we handle human resources. And this is very important to a management audience. In the private sector today, the issue of human resources is handled in terms of motivation, in terms of incentives, recognition, and so on. In the public system, the issue of HR is handled in terms of entitlements, in terms of hierarchy, seniority. And we are not able to escape this. Although, I must tell you that there have been good changes that have been brought about. Several years ago, I was in charge of the public transport system, the KSRTC in this state. And one of the problems we encountered was very high absenteeism among the drivers and conductors. So what we did was, we introduced an incentive system. We said, if the drivers present themselves at work X number of days every month, repeatedly for so many days, so many months, they would get a block incentive of Y. If they did not, then they would be transferred to very remote locations. And I must tell you that over a period of time, the introduction of this incentive drastically brought down absenteeism among drivers. So even in the public domain, there is now better realization that the way to make things work is by appealing to human nature, human instincts, human motivation. But the fundamental differences between the public domain and the private domain, although they are narrowing, they still remain. One other difference is in terms of organization. In management, in your classes now, you know that a lean management structure is the best, that basically institutions, organizations must be flat, non-hierarchical, empowering people and performing. In our system, it is not so as yet. Most of our organizations are still hierarchical. There is a divorce between responsibility and output, and at the bottom, the cutting edge, are people who work do not really know the product they are delivering. So, because of this problem, we see that there is a lack of involvement in work, there is alienation at the lowest level, and this often conveys the feeling that things are not working and, our system is not efficient. Peter Drucker many years ago said that the essence of management is managing for results. That you have an organization, you have resources, there are constraints, leadership and technology brings outcomes. That is really the core of management. And around it is built all the disciplines of finance and so on. Similarly, my argument is that in what we call new public management, we are moving away from the Max Weber model of bureaucracy, command, control, power, authority, and logic, to what we now describe as new public management. What do we mean by new public management? The essence of new public management in any aspect of the public domain, the essence of new public management is proper delivery of public services. Today, we regard delivery of public service as a product, which is why many states in India have legislated on the Right to Services Act. This is a very significant development, ladies and gentlemen. Bihar started it, Delhi was the next, and Karnataka has also promulgated a Right to Services Act. Karnataka now says 151 services to be delivered to the public by various departments of the state at the taluka level, at the district level, by organizations like the Revenue Department, Transport Department, Police, etc. 151 services have to be delivered within a particular time frame. And the pain of not delivering will fall squarely on the public servant. And that public servant has to pay a fine. It's a minuscule fine of 20 rupees a day. But wait a minute, that fine has to be handed over to the complainant. That is the person who makes the complaint that I have not received the designated public service within that particular time, has to be given a compensation at the rate of 20 rupees a day, subject to a maximum of 500 rupees from the delinquent public official. And there is a process for all that. Now, in my opinion, this is very significant because what it has done, it has really moved us away from this model of Max Weber theory X, which you all know, to something that is more consensual, theory Y. People are empowered, people down the line have to work, they are trained to perform, and they are very time conscious. 20 years ago, when I was Transport Commissioner, I used to visit the RTO offices. RTO is Regional Transport Commissioner, Regional Transport Officer. And I was appalled to see long lines outside these counters, people hanging around, touts having a field day, trying to intermediate between the applicant and the office. And when I inquired into it deeply, I was told this is because, you know, the public don't know what exactly they have to do in order to get a learner's license or a regular license or a fitness certificate. And these touts provide that information, what is called information arbitrage. And as a result, they are able to get things done. So after some discussion, I put up a board in all these RTO offices, including in Mangalore, saying, these are the items of work, A, B, C, D, E, like, you know, learner's license, etc. For these items of work, what you need to supply the following documents. And if these documents are okay, within so many days, you will get it. And if you don't get it, complain directly to the RTO. That was really a success in Karnataka, and that, in a way, also provides the cornerstone for the Right to Services Act. But there are other innovations in government that I would like to tell you, which also exemplifies new public management. And I'll tell you from my own experience, because experience is the best lesson that we can learn. In the Karnataka, how many of you have traveled by Volvo buses? It's surprising that even Dr. Vasudev Rao has gone by a Volvo bus. Okay, the Volvo buses go under the name Airavata. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of branding, market segmentation that you learn in your management classes. Many years ago, a few years ago when I was there, we were losing business to the private operators. And we were told that, the private operators are more efficient, they are capable, they can deliver the service faster, and therefore KSRTC has no future. Well, to cut a long story short, what we did was, we were the first state transport undertaking in India to get Volvo buses at the rate of 55 lakhs a bus. Now it is 75 lakhs. And the technical opinion was that this was a sure way to disaster because there was no way we can earn that much money. And then what we did was we gave it a new color, we gave it good seats, put water bottle there, newspapers, blanket, called it Airavata, which was the top line branding for these buses. The medium tier branding we called Rajahamsa, which was district to district buses but without air conditioning at a lower rate. And at the bottom line, we also introduced time-specific buses between Bangalore, Mysore, and so on. Now, this is an example of branding. It's also an example of market segmentation. But what it has done is to ensure that a product is made available to the public at a designated price and in a particular manner. And today, we started with 20 buses in 2003, 20 Volvo buses. Today, KSRTC has the largest number of Volvo buses in the country, numbering 400. Between Mangalore and Udupi, if you remember, the private sector, the private buses had cornered a major share of the market. Today, yesterday when I was in Mangalore, I was very happy to hear the KSRTC say that every half an hour, there's a Volvo bus between Mangalore, Udupi, and Manipal, and that 85 to 90% of the market share has come to the KSRTC. Now, why is it? It is because KSRTC is giving a particular service at a particular rate, and there is reasonable conformity in terms of the consumer's mind about what he or she is going to get by way of quality. So these are some changes that have been brought about in the new public management in terms of public services. One other example is e-governance. Farmers, had a very hard time getting land records. Usually what they had to do was to queue up outside the village accountant offices or the taluk offices, get hold of various intermediaries, pay a bribe, and so on. So a young IAS colleague of mine, who was later given the national award, the Prime Minister's national award for this, he devised an IT system called Bhumi. Have you heard of this Bhumi? Okay. What Bhumi does is it's a standalone IT system, completely loaded with all records, and the farmer has to just go to the Bhumi kiosk, key in his requirement, pay 15 rupees or 20 rupees, and within moments, his RTC, record of tenancy and cultivation, the RTC copy is made available to him. And so today, in all the taluka offices, you have these Bhumi kiosks that have liberated the farmer from the tyranny of the system. But that is not the only thing. You take KSRTC again. KSRTC, you can buy a ticket for travel between any point in Karnataka to any other point from anywhere in Karnataka. You don't have to go and queue in the bus stand and do it. And that was when we started this IT system for delivery of tickets. Today, my friend in the KSRTC tells me that they are going to start an SMS system by which you can buy your tickets over the internet, and details of the journey will be made available to you through the SMS. So I'm saying all this not to bring to your notice that the system is really outstanding, it is great and so on. That's not my intention. My intention is just to tell you that there is a movement today away from that old inefficiencies which we have been accustomed to something that is focused on delivery, quality, and on public need. If this is so, you will ask me, why is government so inefficient? I mean, why can't government function like the private sector in its best? And I think, to be candid with you, there are some reasons for this. And I would like a young, intelligent audience like this to also appreciate the reasons. The first reason is scale. No matter what we do, we can't replicate the success of a particular thing across. The secretary to the Chief Minister of Bihar was in Bangalore, and we had a discussion about implementing the Right to Services Act. And he told me, and this is an example, ladies and gentlemen, of what scale is. He said, in the last 6 months that the Right to Services Act has been implemented, from August 2011, in the last 6 months, 72 lakh applications have come from the citizens for delivery of public services. And within the designated period, about 55 lakhs have been met, which means